Okay, so recording has also started. So yeah, what I was talking about is we will go through the dynamic data-driven features, and which is like, you want to call a feature file and you want to pass the data to the dynamic, a feature file. So what we have seen is earlier that we will be able to call a feature file, but we wanted to see how we can pass a feature file with some specific parameters. We're going to talk about the setting up a wiremark server. Wiremark server is something we wanted to know how we can create a mock API server. Instead of you connecting to some open endpoints like request.rest, the way we are doing it earlier. So now we go to this req-res.in and trying to understand their API doc and trying to test that using Karate. Instead of that, we will try to set up our own mock server and try to do it. And this we will achieve it using Java code. And we talk a bit of hooks. So I'll run through the documentation. I'll try to mimic the same thing in while setting up this Java code, and then we will see what is that hooks he's talking about. We may not get into so detail, but I'll explain you what is it you can make use of it. The next thing is the DB testing. So this is a very interesting topic. I think I'm not sure you will find it on the Karate documentation, but yeah, this is a bit of a Java code we need to call, but you don't have to do a lot of coding out there. But it's very easy to use Karate. I wouldn't say Karate, it's again Java code only, but it's very easy to test DB, if you have to run some queries, fetch some data, run some SQL procedures and all that. So we talk about how to set up, how to connect to the JDBC, what is the string template you can use. Then a bit of matcher techniques. So these matcher techniques are, it's all about like how you can, so matcher techniques will make more sense if you're working in GraphQL testing. Because you have a lot of data to assert, you have to go to the nested JSON structure and things like that. So I would probably explain the matcher techniques when we are trying to, verify the schema with whatever the GraphQL server, the GraphQL response you get. Then the other thing is with respect to the automation, we will try to configure a Karate runner, and also the set up the VS Code, and how we debug and how we can write a basic a UI test case. So that's all we're gonna have today. Pretty interesting stuff, not like the traditional what we were doing earlier. So not only REST post and things like that, but it's a lot more different than what we are doing earlier. Okay. So first, let's look at the dynamic data-driven features. So in here, so let me comment this. Now this is what is way we left earlier. So first thing is I'm going to talk about the data-driven features. So for that, I have to first need to create a feature file. So I'll just copy, create a feature file, and I just say like weather API. So this is something I thought I can talk about it. Okay, weather API feature. So I'll change a bit here. I need to remove a lot of things. So here we say this is a weather API testing. Oh, weather API testing. Okay, and here the base URL. We in the last session we said base URL is something, whatever the base URL sits in the Karate config.js, it's pretty much global in scope. So you can you don't have to say refer something as a Karate config dot base URL. The moment when you say base URL, it automatically refers the one which sits in the global scope. It goes and checks in global scope. But for now here we will get the weather API thing. I have to just get my key. So for that, I have to just refer my code, which I've already done that. So that is what I'm trying to check. I have, this is the one. Yeah, this is the one. Sorry. Yeah. So I'll just copy this is the URL. And for now, we'll just paste the URL here like this. This is the Open Weather Map API. If you go to this URL, you get to see there is no key given, and that's the reason I'm getting this error. So if you like to access the Open Weather API, so please create an API key for yourself and try to access these, if you want to play around with this API documentation. The main reason why we're looking at is how we can pass a dynamic data driven. That's the main thing. You can also look at the API documentation. What is that we have to give here? See, it says um, the latitude, the longitude, and what is that you're very interested to send and things like that. So yeah, so this is all about the weather API. You can create an account like here from here, and you get a generate an API key. So let me go back. Let me go back here, and I'm gonna just copy a pretty straightforward thing. I'll just copy the scenario outline. So I'll just remove this. Yeah, so what we're saying is whether the user can fetch the weather info various US cities given a path weather. So once we go, when we hit this endpoint, so if I copy this and if I go back and I hit this endpoint, path weather, it says. So when I say weather like this, I won't get any information. The reason is I don't have an API key, and that is why it is complaining. So there is a 401 code we're getting over here. It's like unauthorized. So that is the reason we're getting the problem. But we want to give the parameter, the query parameters like app ID is equal to app key. So that is what we will give now. So I'll just copy again the API key, what I have already have it. Yeah, so okay, I don't have the API key in this place. Okay, I should be having it here. Okay, okay, I probably taken it out. Okay, I don't remember the API key. So for now, let me just check if I have an API key. API key. That's fine. So I think I'm sorry. I think I deleted the API key for some reason. I was posting to GitHub and I thought I have it in my machine. So that's okay. So we'll look at the other way of solving this problem. So let's look at the request res API itself. And here we will try to make get a user here. So what we do is we just refer this and let's take out everything. Let's take out everything. So we don't need this. So I'll just copy this URL and paste it here. So here I just paste the main URL like this. And now here we say verify that the users for various users verify that I can fetch various user info. Okay, so this is what it is. Now here we say given path, and so the path is like this is the path we have. So API uses and to. So we just say to we will not give. So we will just say this as an ID like this. So we'll come back to that. What is that ID is all about. So for now, we just create an examples and we just say this as ID like that. And here we say 2 and here we say 3. Okay, so that's what it is. Now here we probably need to give plus. And then what else? So when we say given path and we want to just say when method is get, then the status is 200. So pretty straightforward example. Now we will make this as a dynamic data driven and we'll see how we can. So this is dynamic data driven. This is a pretty simple data driven. It's not a dynamic data driven. That means I wanted to make use of this scenario in other and from another feature file. So for now, we'll just create another feature file. So I'll rename this as I give a name that reusable feature. And now we'll just say that users fetch user info. Now I'll create another feature file I say call reusable file, feature file. Okay. Now here, what I'm going to do is I don't give any of these stuff. I'm interested only the test the user info. And here I would probably say that, yeah, verify that I can fetch the various users information. Okay. Now here, so let's go back to the reusable feature file. I will not make it as a scenario outline here. I will take this out as well. Okay. And here as well, I'll take it out. And here I would say that, given path. And here I would say the ID. So this ID will be like the one we get it from the user ID. I would probably say it this way. So this is a copy it and paste it here. So it's the one. So this is a base reusable feature file. This is a feature file with just expecting an ID to be passed from somewhere. Now, so who is going to call this feature file? This guy is going to call the feature file. Now this guy need not to do anything. I just have to just remove everything. I just have to say call and say call here. And here I say the feature file name. So this is a feature file name. I'll just say right click and refactor, sorry, copy the path. I just need the content root. I think it's, even if it's not necessary for you to give the entire thing like this, you can just say call reusable feature like this. This is also valid. if you think that if you're not able to find the feature file, you can probably say class path and just give the reusable feature file, and you can say that under training I have this feature file, so you can even call this way. So make sure that the quotes is given and the class path is inside the quotes. So that's one of the way you can call it. So here we just say call, and so I'll put this and I'll remove this and just say call. And so let me confirm the syntax a bit. It's just want to make sure the syntax is correct. So this is a reusable feature file. Yeah, so we just, yeah, so I'm just calling this dynamic data driven. I think it's somewhere here. Yeah, so, okay, never mind. Okay, now let's go back. And so what happens is when you call this particular feature file will be called, we need to pass the ID here. So now when you call this, it won't work. And the reason is when you go back to the call reusable feature file, we need to, yeah, I don't have to give the entire class file, but we'll just give the reusable feature file. And now here, when you call the ID, it's expecting something called ID, and which is going to assign to the def user ID, and that is what we're going to pass over here. Now, what is that we need to give over here is we have to just say like this, give in a curly brace, and what is expecting is it says ID and this ID. So that's it. So now if we wanted to run this, this is a dynamic data driven. So there is a feature file which we are calling. That feature file is basically expecting a data to be supplied from another caller. And that caller is actually providing the data via a scenario outline, which is a data driven. And a conventional data driven test cases, what we do is we just give a typical keyword like, scenario outline, we have seen in the last call, give a scenario outline and we give all the data we wanted, and it will run on its own. But it's a pretty static data. What if you have a data which is dynamic in nature? You need to, we call this principle as a just-in-time data management. In such scenarios, you have to pass the data like this, the way we are talking about. So how do we do it is we just have to give ID. So make sure that this ID is same as the one what we have it over here. So this is something custom keyword. to this scenario, but this ID is expecting that ID has to be passed to this guy. So that is the reason I'm passing it here. Now, since I have an example, and that's why I'm saying ID 2 and 3. So another interesting thing you need to make sure that what if I have to pass an extra variable. Now I need to pass even a name. So let's say I need to pass a name like this. I say name is equal to something called username. Okay, let's say I give like this. Now somewhere I need to pass this like, username or things like that. So sorry, this name. Now in that case, you have to go back and again pass the same thing like this comma and just say username. What is the username you wanted? So this is another way of passing the data to another feature file. So it's like passing arguments to the feature file. So for now, let's take it out and let's go back here and remove this as well and remove this as well and save it. And now let's go back here and let's try to run this. Just give me a minute. Okay. So let me, yeah. Okay, now let's run this again. Now let's see what will happen. Now when I run this, I just start running. And if you get any syntax issues, okay, it's all good. So it works like a charm. It worked like charm. There is no issues there. You see, it has made a call to two. That is a get request. And let's look at the report now. So I open the report, and this is what I see. There is a feature file. We call the reusable feature file, and this is how it looks like. The report looks pretty neat here. You see, there is another gutter over here. This is the first gutter, and this is the next line. Another column you see that indicates that we are calling another reusable feature file. So when we say call read ID is equal to 2, that means this particular ID is passed to this URL, and that is where it made a call. And it says that there is a 2, this particular ID has been passed here, and the request was successful. Similarly, we pass the same thing. The same reusable feature file is called for another time for the combination for the ID called 3. So that's about the dynamic data-driven feature file. So it's pretty easy. There's nothing complex there. All you need to take care of that. These IDs need to be passed. Now, very interestingly, which I would like to talk about here is something called, let's say, I wanted to verify. Let's say when I make a REST call here, when I make a GET call, I'm getting some data here. You would have probably seen I'm getting email as this. I get first name as Janet and last name in viewer and things like that. What if I wanted to refer this data in my other feature file, in this reusable feature file? So how do I do that? I want to assert here, because now you're saying that, okay, fine, I'm just making a post call. So I'm making a get call, but I don't want to validate here. I don't want to do any assertion here because that loses the purpose of creating a reusable feature file. I want to have this feature file to control the assertions, to validate the assertions or verify the data or response in this scenario, not in the reusable feature file. Because what if this feature file is being used some other test? Yes, fine. We are saying that the status should be 200, obviously. Otherwise, it's of no use making this get call. Status is 200 is pretty standard, pretty common. If anyone wants to use it, they can use it. But what if the other feature file wants to assert the data, because we have not written that? So there is something called shared scope. So when we call like this one, there is something called, so as per the the documentation, there is something called shared scope. So this is what we're going to look at it now. So when we say call read reusable feature file, this particular, the response will be stored in a variable called response as a keyword. I think we all know, we've seen it that earlier. But I wanted to verify that response over here. Now, what I can do here is I can probably say get that response and assert it over here. So let's try to first print the response and see what will happen over here, and just say the response of the ID, like this, okay, is response. Let's see what will happen if we can get this. Our options are pretty, options are many there. If we try to get the response what we've done earlier. So what is happening is this is called a shared scope, as I mentioned earlier. We're not storing the response in a variable like a def k is equal to something like this. So when we store the response to this res, that means we need to call the res.res. So entire the data or the response what we get when we call the specific feature file with specific ID will be dumped into a variable called res. But if you're not interested to define like this, you can just say res, you can just call the response, and this response is basically the one what we get it from the karate. So the response object which is globally available. So let's try to run this and see what is that it prints. So we got something. Let's go back and refresh this. So here I did not get anything, though I got it. So here I didn't get anything. The response object is not being referred. So what we can do here is, if we go back to this reusable feature file, we get something called the response. So I want to store that response here. So I use something called karate.set, and I say I want to store the response like this one. I would probably say resp underscore ID. ID is nothing but, or I would probably use user ID here. So, and here I say response. Now what happens is, when I make a post, when I get a get call and I want to store this response into a map, or we call it as a typical a container, and where we want to store the data, so that I wanted to reuse this, or maybe I want to take this response and do something in my other feature file. So now if you go back, now here, let's try to print that response. So now here I'm saying karate.get. I know what is the name of the variable. So here I would say is ID, and here I say like this, and see what will happen here. So let's see what's the response we get. Okay, so we didn't get anything. So let's refresh this. We didn't get anything. So what if I just go back? ID is 2 response underscore ID. It's the same thing, because we're actually doing a shared scope. So we should be able to get that. There's nothing. Okay. The reason is why we are not getting that is because of this. We need to give something called embedded expression. So this is something I had always confusion. So let's try this, an embedded expression. So now let's try to print that. No, I didn't get it. Okay, so let's try to. I'll try to do this way. So I'll try to print just like the way it was. I just do this and see now what will happen. Whether the response is being stored or not, I wanted to even verify it here. So here the response is karate.get, and this is the ID. And here we see what's the response we get. So that's the first thing we want to try. And this is what it is. So let's try to run this again. Res underscore user ID, and this is what it is. Yeah, it looks fine. I don't see any challenge. Let's go here and try to run this again. Okay, looks like I got something somewhere. Yeah, I get the data here. Okay, so I get the data, so it's not bad. So that means it is storing the response. So it is storing the response in this, but when I call this in this feature file, so when I call here, I'm not able to fetch that. That's the, that's an interesting thing I'm seeing. So let me try it this way. Okay, let me try this way. Yeah, I need to give the keyword as read and only then it'll work. How about I store this time to resp is equal to like this. And here I try to print the resp and see what will happen. Now, I had a situation earlier. I was trying to refer the globals, the shade scope, and I thought I'll try to implement here, where it looks like it's not working for some reason. I don't know why it is not able to fetch that. So let me see for a minute. There's something called shade scope. If not, we don't have to spend time on this, but this is an interesting thing we need to know. Yes, so when we call like this, like config, yeah. Okay, this is called a shade scope. Okay, so okay, so the login value can be reused. That's what we're doing. Okay, so let's, okay, I think I got it. I think I should not use this, the read, so the call should not be used. And let's try to run this again and see what will happen. Oh, no, it won't work because it's basically a feature file. Expected is, okay. So let me figure out this, I'll probably, update you guys, in the, offline. So this is something I've done earlier, just like, a few days back, but I really wondering why I'm not able to crack this. Yeah, but basically the idea here is when we run this feature file, we want to store the response over here, and we want to just call the response underscore user ID. So ideally we should get that because we're not doing anything. That's the main purpose of having the the shade scope, so that you can refer the data, the response from the earlier call. So let's try this, and if not, I'll just we don't have to spend time. No, for some reason it is not happening. What else could go wrong here? I'm just saying set this response, set this, and I'm just calling that. So this is going to, so this will basically die when you call another feature file. But when I'm calling from here, it should be there. I don't know why I am not able to see that. Okay, let's try this time and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, I think it's not working, so it should be fine. Let's go back to this. Oh yeah, I get it. This is the old one, I think. Oh yeah, this is the one, yeah. So I get it now. So how it is, the syntax is when you call the call reader, and I should probably say like this. I think it's a bit of syntaxing thing, and that's where I'm having a hard time to get the data. So let's go back again. Yeah, I think it's a syntax problem. So that's why I was not able to fetch the data correctly. Yeah, so yeah, because this is something I recently discovered, that there is something called shade scope, And that is where I'm more interested to know. So yeah, so this is a critical thing to understand. When we are trying to run a specific feature file, we want to store the response of that specific ID. First, we need to call like this karate.set, store the data into this set. So set is the like in a map, like in a map.put, the way we do it. And we want to store with respect to the ID what we use. And after that, we don't need to print it. And after that, whoever is going to call this feature file, they can recall this, they can call that karate.get, that specific ID, and assert whatever they wanted. Now here, let's say, for example, I want to assert this with resp is equal to, and I want to store it in a variable like this, karate.get, and here I will say resp underscore like this, okay? And now from here, I wanted to assert whether the data, whatever that ID or we are asserting here, the ad, the company, and the text has whatever the data we wanted. So what is that we are expecting in this is I want to have the ID should be, it should be an integer. So it's pretty straightforward. I think we have seen earlier as well. So we just say match. Sorry. Yeah. So now, excuse me, match dot. We just say resp dot data. Let's go back. What is that we have it in the response over here? We have only response like this, and we have a data. And inside the data, we have a ID. So this data is at the root level. So we need to access that, and we say data is equal to like this. Last time we seen it should be number. Sorry. And now let's try to run this and see what will happen. Okay, it looks like it worked. Now refresh this and we see it is number. So for now, let's chain this. I want to just let the fail test. Sorry, let the test fail. Of course, it is failed. It is failed. I go back and refresh. It says okay, the test is failed because it's expecting a string, but it is not a string. It's basically an ID. So this actually opens up a lot of opportunities for us to validate the response from another reusable feature file. This is something called shade scope, as I mentioned earlier. So if you call like this, the data, if you want to fetch the data from the other feature file, make sure that you set it into another variable, then you call that, and you make use of that response and assert it whatever you want to do. So this is all about the dynamic, data-driven feature testing. Let's look at the WireMock server. So the WireMock server, what we're going to look at is this is an interesting link I found last time, and I even pinged it. Now I already shared earlier, so let me share it here on the chat if you are interested to know. So what we do in this is we will just set up this WireMock, and we will call that the WireMock. We set up that and we call it, and we verify how we can make a post call or a get call with our own API server. So for now, we will not look into all the examples. We'll just see the get call. So this is what I'm trying to copy it. So I'm just copying this. So before we do all these, we need to do a bit of setup over here. So I'm assuming if you're having an experience on WireMock, yeah, I'm happy, and you can probably just see this, or maybe you can ignore it. But if you're not going to get details into the WireMock thing, all I want to share is this is the dependency you need to add. This GitHub WireMock JRE8, and this is a version you need to add it in your pom.xml file in the dependency. And now I am creating a file Java code called server, and here I am basically setting up a WireMock server configuration, and I'm just giving some port and things like that. And here I just imported some WireMock variables. So that's why when you see here, it's configure for, this is what is a WireMock static variable. And here I'm just calling some stuff, some, stubbing here. So for simplicity, let's quickly copy this. This is the one, copy and paste it over here. And now we're having some issue, so we just have to fix this. It's import static method of the wiremog get. This collection dot get and URL equals to it's wiremog. Okay, fine. So yeah, you need to be careful if you're not if you don't import the right packages, you will have problem to figure out what is happening out there. So what this is happening here is we're going to hit then a local host called 8097, and when we hit this path called user get, and I should get the response saying 200, and this is what I should get the data like 1 2 3 4, or probably say 6 7 8 something, and I should see the some data, I should see something like a username, something called Jack Ryan, and whatever the data you wanted to send. Pretty simple. Instead of you fetching or connecting to request.rest.in, what if you don't want to connect to some outside environment and I wanted to run my own API server and I want to test something? So that's the agenda, what's why we're looking at this. So now we need to start the service. So we need to first, when you set up this and when you hit this endpoint, this is what it's supposed to get. Now, what else we need for this? So if you go back here and we need to even stop this server. So this is an interesting, so we need to stop this server, and that's it. So if you look at these before class and after class, so the author here is using the JUnit hook, but it's up to us if you don't want to use. But I will show you how we can call it and how we can stop it in our via the feature file itself. So I'm not making use of the JUnit, the hooks over here. One thing I wanted to recall, and I just want to go back to the reusable feature file here. An important step I missed out here is when you're calling this feature files in parallel mode, make sure that the one which is a reusable file should not be called in parallel mode. So you need to just say at this parallel is equal to false. So what happens is when you're running all your feature files in parallel mode, this feature file also will run in parallel mode. I mean, this scenario runs in a parallel execution, and this guy will fail. The reason is it's looking for something called ID, which is not supposed to run the way it's supposed to run. So we need to call this feature file from another feature file, and this should be in parallel. So just pay attention to when you're running a parallel execution, just make sure that you give this tag called parallel is equal to false. All right. Now we set up the wire mock. And now we would just want to say, execute this and see how it works. I just want to call this and see, just for testing before we really put that in our code and via Karate. So I just say server.setup and I'll just run this and see what will happen. Okay, the server is started and you see it is started. Now let's hit the endpoint. Let's hit the endpoint like localhost. And what we have is 8097. We did not get anything because it says see request was not matched. So it's very intuitive. See, it says that you're not hitting the right resource path. Now when I hit this and I get this 333 and say the Jack Ryan. So this is the local API server is running. And now let's try to write an API test case use Karate and see how we can assert this or validate this. So let's stop this server now. So we need to stop the server. We stopped it. Now I refresh, we don't have a server running. Now I'll comment this line of code. Now here I'm going to write another feature file. I'll just take this call Java code and say wiremog. I just say API server underscore test. Now here I'll remove some of the setup of wiremog server, set up a wiremog server. and test the get method. Okay, that's pretty as simple as that. Now here we just say we don't need any base, any background thing. And here we just say run a get call. Now let's take out, let's put this, I think we need to put a background because I want to show you this hooks thing. So what we want to do here is we want to just say call and call once. So pay attention to this call and call once. So when we want to, when you call this keywords, let's say when we call this Java code. So let's try to call this Java code here. And here I'm calling this server. I'll just copy the reference and paste it over here. So this is my server. Okay. And now here I wanted to call this server. So I would say server dot basically a setup. So this is basically, we can put that into another feature file. I want to just put that in another feature file so that we don't have to do this server reusable feature file. And here I'll open this server reusable feature file, remove everything. I remove even this as well because we don't want anything. We'll keep the parallel tag is equal to true, and we just say start the server. And here I just say start the server, start the API server. Now here I'm going to take this out everything, and I'll go back to this API testing, and I'll just cut this and I'll paste it here. Okay, so here what we're doing is we want to start the server, and we wanted to even destroy that server, like we want to even stop the server. So here for now, what we do is we just say we want to start the server. So how do we want to start the server? We just want to say call. Here we want to say call once only. We don't want to start the server again and again. When you say call like this, let's say if we call like shift. Okay, so Control C, cancel, paste it here. Now, when you call like this, in background, what is a background? If you're coming from a cucumber experience, what background does is it runs the steps in background runs every time before each scenario. So that means when you run this scenario like this, let's say you have a scenario now, we are trying to do the same thing. So let's do the same thing. So we have, let's copy the path, or let's copy the entire URL. So here I say like this, and when I get the method, and I should see the status 200. Now when I call this, and when I call another one like this, another scenario, let's say I'm making a post call. So this call, that is starting up the server, happens twice because the step runs every time before each scenario. That's the expected or the intended behavior of the background feature or the background step in the Cucumber world. But Karate offers you something called call once. What this will do is, okay, fine. If you have a multiple scenarios, I will ensure that you will not start the server, or I will not run this feature file again. I will only run this once, and I'll make sure that it's done only once. So that's one thing, we have to look at it, when it comes to this call once. So for now, we'll just say call once, and we just call this feature file like this. Okay. And let's go back. And so let's go back to this feature file. I just want to call this read the feature file. This is what I should be. Gets confused with these syntax thing. Call once. Okay. Now, if you go back to the server reusable file, when we call this, it calls this java.com.server and it's just started the server. So here we just say, we'll put a sys out saying that whether the server is started or not. We just say the server is started at 8097 port. That's all it is. Now we go back here. This is all same as is. Now here, this will close some of the feature files which we don't want it. Okay, so this is what it is. Now let's try to run this. And let's try to run this and see what is that we get now. So clear all and say, I'm not tried this and I'm trying for the first time. Okay, so I'm getting an exception. ID is not, oh, sorry. It should be this one. Server reusable feature file. Okay. Now let's try this and see what will happen. Okay, it's still not. Log acquired. Feature file server setup is not a function. Ah, okay. Oh, the reason why we're getting that server setup is not a function here is, if you go back here, it's basically it's an instance method. It's not a starting method. So it's up to us whether we want to have a starting method, or if you don't want to have a starting method, we can also live like, let's make it a little, let's make it as a static, an instance method, or maybe we'll make it as a static method here. So because we have for simplicity, let's make it static. And this is public static void setup, public static void tear down. And we don't have to need an instance of an object because we want to start a server. For that, we don't need an instance of an object. So when we want to read, when we want to have an instance of an object, something like which we don't want to have it get mutated. And then in that case, probably it's better to create an instance. But in this case, it's not going to have any mutation here. It always remains constant. So we're going to start the server, we're going to set up, we're going to tear down. So that's as simple as that. Now, here we just say server.start and we go back again. And let's go back here and try to run this and see what is it we get. Okay, now it is doing something. It has started the server, it also passed. Now you see our report is successful. The test is passed. It started the server. It started the server here and it has made a get call and the response is successful. Yeah, we got some unexpected data string, but that's okay. We can ignore it. But as long as we get the data, that means when you make a guess this particular response, or when you hit this endpoint, it's basically even stopped it. I mean, when you call the feature file, again what do you call it? It's also teared down. So we don't have to explicitly say to call the tear down. I mean, stop the server. So here it started the server and it ensured that the server is up and running. This particular server is running and we got the response and we are done with that. Now, that's another way of, if you don't want to call a specific or hit an endpoint on an internet, or maybe something online. We don't want to do it. Something you want to run it offline locally. You can try this way, and pay attention to this call once. You want to run only once, and that's why it is setting up a server for yourself. For you before you start the test. Now, if you have another test like this, let's say I have another test. So let's if you go back to the server. Now here I'm just saying this stub. Now here I have another test like user address, let's say user address. And here I'm going to send the address like address something like something like Bangalore. I just was just a simple address. Okay. And I'll take this out. And now we go back and we want to make another call. This time, instead of hitting this endpoint address get, we'll say address over here. And here we say um, run another endpoint or hit, or we just say fetch address. Here we say fetch user, just rename it. Now, ideally, we should not have server created twice. It should only create once, and we should be able to hit both the endpoints and see what will happen. I am kind of suspecting that this may not work, because once it completes this scenario, the server is it's not available, and this may or may not work. But let's see how it works, how it goes. Okay, now here I say run this feature file. Sorry, run this feature file and see what will happen. Okay, it started the server, it made, okay, fantastic. So it's basically lived in that context and it worked. So you got the server, it only started once, and when you hit this endpoint, you should not see the server running according to our theory. Now if you hit this endpoint, we don't have it, that's good. So it's good. So it's interesting to experiment like this. If you wanted to have a server on your own, you can call the Java code here. You can put it a reusable feature file and you can call it. But if you really don't want to have a feature file like this, let's say I'm not interested to have the feature file. I can also store it in a config.js file. The same thing, I can just copy this and post it and put it into a config.js file, and I can create, I can just copy like this and I paste it in the config.js file. Instead of saying var, I would say, sorry, def, I would say server. And here, I will not keep this. I cannot start this. So I can start the server like this and let it. And whenever you call your execution, or when you make a when you run your test, it makes sure that it'll create an instance of get an object of server and start the server. But I don't know, I wouldn't recommend doing this way. It is not ideal to do so. I would always recommend to put that in a feature file, so that you have a control and so that the reference is lost and the server also dies at the end. So that way we'll have more control. But here I'm not sure whether it works or not. So I wouldn't recommend. But this syntax, this the one you can use it when you have a utilities to you make a call. Let's say I have a utilities, this is what we're going to look at it now. So let me jump on to the the next thing called DB utility. So we looked at this, the Java code, and we talked a bit of hooks. So in hooks, we don't have a typical hooks what we see in karate. Sorry, like the typical hooks we see in what do you call in Cucumber. So if you go back to the hooks here, so if you're looking for Cucumber hooks, Karate does not support them because they purely depend on the Java code. So like before and after, so all that goes into a Java code. But when you say background, so this is like every scenario. And if you want to have something globally, karate dot call single, that is what we see in something called once. So we can also do that. Karate call single is, again, you put that in your config.js, or you can put that in your one of the feature file. So you can call only one. So what if this server feature reusable feature file is being called in multiple places? So we don't want to call the server again and again. So instead we can just say karate dot and call single, and we can call whatever we wanted over here. So this is like globally available only once. So this is the one what you've seen is only called only once with respect to the feature file. This one, the one we're seeing is something with respect to globally. I've not tried it, but I would encourage you guys to try this. It's pretty simple. There's nothing complex here. We just have to refer this example and you'll get an idea. So there is something called configure after scenario. So here in configure after scenario, so we can do couple of things, like in here we can configure like what is it we want to do. Like at the end of every scenario, you can call another feature file and you can do let's say you want to kill something, you want to stop the server. So that's something we can try to do. So let's give it a shot and see if it works. So I just wanted to see if we can try to do that. So I'll create another feature file and just say after scenario. Okay. And here we'll try to get the instance of this. Okay, so we already have it. I just want to say tear down and see if it works. If it doesn't work, that's fine. We don't have to really be concerned about it, because anyways we're not going to do this kind of setup. But just for your understanding, I'm trying to show you this. So stop the server, and now we will go back to our server reusable feature file. Is start the server after scenario API server test. So here we'll comment this out, and now we say configure after. I think I need to make sure that syntax is correct. I'll just call this scenario. So this is called as a multi-line multi-line doc string. So this is how it looks like. You can also call this is a JavaScript basically. So we have a after scenario, not after hyphen. We have a scenario. We don't need any caller. We can also send information if you wanted to, but we don't have any information here. So we don't need anything, but yeah, it's okay. We can just keep that way and try to see what will happen now. So let's try to execute this and see how it runs. So let's try this, try this. Yeah, I've not tried this before, but if it doesn't work, that's okay. Yeah, it's working. Cool. I'm impressed to see there's no brainer stuff. This is, I think, we were able to quickly. It's very, very simple. We managed to stop the serve. Wonderful. See this one? It's beautiful. So this is another way of having a hook. What do you want to do at the end of every scenario? Sorry. So you can configure the scenario even in this background, or you can configure it in at the feature, at the scenario level. When you just configure it, make sure that it runs every time. So if you go back to the report again, let's look at the report. Now we started a server. That's what we started here, set up. Then we make sure that we want to stop the feature file. We just pass this information, the caller to to the after scenario. And when we do that, it stopped the server, and we don't see that information over here, of course, but we actually seen in our in the console log. If you look at the console log, it's basically stopped the server. So this is a Wiremock server stopped over here. Okay, so that's about the after scenario hook. So we don't have to talk about before scenario, because we already talked about background. That is where it makes sure that before scenario it will run. And if you wanted to do after scenario, that's what we looked at it. So make sure that you write something in a create a feature file called after scenario, and do whatever you want to do, clean up a resources, stopping a server, and or ending the connection with the DB if you have very complex scenario. And make sure that you call that in your in your code, in your in a feature file, saying that and configure like this after test scenario, and make sure that you call this the after scenario. So pay attention to these var and karate. These keywords are stored in the JavaScript context. It's not in the Java world. So if you're coming from a if you're coming from Java and very limited knowledge on JavaScript, I would encourage you to learn a bit of JavaScript, so that the options will be many. You can play around a lot, and you can do, even like if you're a bit of JavaScript, if you know the syntax, you can do something and try to play around with these, and the options are many. You can, it's not like limited to whatever the karate is showing over here, but you have many options over there. If you know JavaScript, you can play around. We can do some loops, get some data, manipulate the data, and make some download some external libraries, call them, and we can play around with that way. uh, we don't have to look at all those examples, because I've tried it earlier. But yeah, I would encourage you to get a bit of knowledge on JavaScript as well. Okay, so the next thing we'll look at the DB testing. So for now, for DB testing, what is the very first thing? I'll probably, I need a minute break. I'll just come back in a minute. Just allow me. I just need a glass of water, so my throat is getting dried. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the DB testing now. So what we have in the DB testing here is we need to first download the something called a JDBC template, which is the Spring-based template. So this is the Spring JDBC template. You can just search online and you get this template. Once you download this template, make sure that the sources are downloaded. And after that, just create a feature file, create a code, a Java code and a Java class like this. This is a pretty standard template. You have it. So we are telling that this is a template and we want to have a utils, and we say this is what we want to configure, a username, password, and driver class name information. If you want to have a MSQL or MySQL or Oracle or any other, Postgres or something. I've not tried with Mongo, of course, but you need to have a Mongo related JDBC template. It may not work with the Oracle, the template what we're using now. It may not work with the MongoDB, but I would encourage you guys to try if you have anything with respect to the Mongo. But yeah, you need to probably look at the JDBC templates. But yeah, for our scope, for our discussion today, it's okay for us to just consider a simple Oracle or MySQL JDBC template. Now, this is what we have it here. It's a pretty standard stuff. The template will give you all these the stuff. You get the code like DB utilities. Then you have an object called, you have a method called read value, read row, and read rows. So what this will do here is when you say read value, when you give the query name, the query what we wanted, like select star from something, and you give the, when you give that query, it makes sure that it returns a string or an integer or a Boolean. So it will give only that specific value. I'm expecting that I should get only one record, and I'm expecting that I should only look for a specific column. I cannot say select star from a specific table and get me everything. That won't work with read value. If you are looking at specific row, you should call a read row. If you're looking for multiple rows, it's obviously like read row. Select, if you're expecting like select stuff on something where the value is equal to something which will return more than one, then in that case you should call read rows. So that's pretty much about the JDBC template. So I just created, created some time back a class called DB utilities, and I pasted this code. And I'll share these, the repo, this entire repo, what we have gone through so far. I'll ask, we'll send it by email. I don't have at the moment with on the GitHub. I'll do that in some time. But yeah, I will send it as a zip file so that you guys can take a look at it offline. What is this? The features and the code we talked about. Okay. Now, what else we want to see here is set up a DB, connect to the JDBC, and that's the one. So this is about the DB class. Now we need to configure the DB. So I have configured a DB on Docker. Like I have MySQL running on my machine and a Docker, and you see my, if we go back to this, I have my SQL Server running. See, this is what my SQL Server running. Last night I've started, my SQL Server is running. All you need to do is just you need to create one Docker Compose YAML file, and you just have to start the Docker Compose, and it automatically pulls up the latest image, and you have your MySQL Server connected. If you are interested to set it up on your own, I would encourage you guys to try something using Docker, because Docker is very easy. Is this server DB connection thread safe? Can be, yeah, you can. It is, it should be thread safe. Should we place call single in Karate config? Karate config, yeah. If you want to have like creating a, let's say you want to create a DB setup, I would probably encourage you guys to put that in the configuration and one time globally so that it's available all over. When you say thread safe, you should make sure that you are not going to the specific feature file should not be tagged in parallel. If you would have paid attention to something called parallel is equal to false, if you have something like parallel, I'm just going through a question, guys. There is someone asked me a question, so I'm responding to that question. So there is something called parallel is equal to false. Make sure that you don't give this, and that will ensure that it won't be executed in parallel mode. But we will talk about in detail this question, Abhishek. Yeah.
Inside.
Yeah, thanks. So what else? Yeah, so yeah, looking at the DB utils, and we just may put this. Yeah, so I was here. So I've configured the MySQL workbench and I've dumped some data. So this is something called Sakila. It's a movies database, which you'll get it when you download it. You can download it online. You can search online and say, search for Sakila movies database. You can download it and you can configure it and you get to see the data. So this is how the data is. We don't have to get into how the DB to be configured, but this is how the data is. Now for simplicity, let's try to um, just try to run a query and see, I'm interested to get a specific value. I want to fetch this city ID or maybe the postal code like this one, maybe the postal code like California. I'll probably say, let's start, I would just say select, sorry, city underscore ID. Yes, select city underscore ID from Sakila underscore start. And here I want to say where district is equal to California. So just one thing I want to try. So we haven't got, there are many Californias are there, and that's the reason we're getting. So I'll just put, I want to get only one row so that I can show you. Okay, I'll probably say address ID is 18 or something. and address underscore ID is 18. Let's see. We got only one record. Fine. So now let's take this record, let's take the SQL query and go back and try to write a simple feature file. And we try to call this and see how it works. So let me Control C, Control V and say DB. Okay, I already have it here. I created it. Okay. Remove this, remove everything, remove this as well. I just paste the query here. Sorry, I think this is Control C, Control V. Okay. And so there's a bit of stuff, some connection strings which I need to have it. So for that, I'm copying it so that to save some time. So this is the root. I have a password like hello world, my DB, and everything is already configured. So this JDBC connection string, you can easily get it. If you are not aware, you can search online, you'll get to know. It's pretty straightforward. And now my DB is running at 3308 port. It's not at 6 port. So if you can also go and check here. You can see this is what I'm running at the 3308 port. See, if you see this is 3308 port, I'm connecting to the schema called test DB. So I close this and I go back and I'm connecting to the daemon called test DB. And I should have this MySQL JDBC driver. That's an important thing. And now we want to make a call. So I will copy the code again. It's pretty easy for me to do that. Copy this and say connect to the DB and fetch the data. Okay. So now this one, I'm doing it in the background, but it's not necessary for you guys to do the background. So you can put it in the karate config.js file. So come into the thread save. So it is actually thread safe. The reason is the karate config.js is only loaded once. It will not be like, though it is a JS file, it's kind of available globally. That means it won't, the state is always constant. You will not have any mutation there. So make sure that it will, if you wanted to have something globally available, the state is not going to change. You put that in the config.js file. But if you think, no, I'm expecting that the state might change, then in that case, you handle that in the feature file. So that is something you need to pay attention. So this config.js file, I can use this config.js file for my DB related stuff. The reason is I wanted to set up the config, the DB, and make a call. So get the instance of a DB is only once. So I can just create it once and I can kill it if when I at the end of it. But if you see this one, we are creating an instance of a DB class and then trying to use this instance. So I would probably say in this case, you can probably put that at the scenario level, or you can put it at the background level, or I would probably say put that in the scenario level. So you make a connection, you do some activity, then you come back and you close it so that you're resource free. So I would probably say like this. I would probably encourage this way, because if you do it in the background, every scenario it will make a call. Or if you have a scenario where you need to make a call every time to the DB, so you can also do like this. You can store the reference in somewhere. So you can put that in the karate config.js file. We'll take this out. We may get some issues here. You can paste it here as well. Instead of def, you can just say var config, and here you can remove this, and here you can just create an instance of this. But you need to make sure that this DB is closed at the end. So that's again, the karate will take care of it at the end of the session. But yeah, just pay attention to these stuff. It's thread safe to my knowledge. You don't have any challenges, I believe. I'm not seeing any issues per se if I look at it, because this is not something with respect to the karate discussion. There's something with respect to your code. So if you know how you're dealing with the object, So you should be able to play around it with that easily. So let's go back and paste it here. So for simplicity, I'll take this out everything. Yeah. Okay, so go back here. I'm not tried it personally, but yeah, so yeah, I would encourage you guys to try that. If it is, it should be thread safe. I mean, I don't see any challenge out there. Okay, so you root hello world password JDBC. It created an instance of it. I'll probably create an instance over here, instance of it, and what is it I want to do is I want to run this query and see the query is successful. So here I'll copy this and paste it over here. And this is the query we are calling. And so here, if we are not getting multiple rows, so we're getting only one row. So I will probably say select star from Sakila something something and ID is equal to 18. And here, when I try to run this, it should work. If it doesn't work, let's see what will happen. So I hope it should work. Let's see. Let's try to run this. It failed. Why it is failed? Oh, class not found exception. I thought so. The reason I'm getting this class not found exception is I don't have this MySQL Server JDBC driver. So to have this, you need to go to the pom.xml file and paste that connect, copy this dependency and go back and paste it over here. So we should be good. So I'll just do a bit of download the resources. So the resource has been downloaded. Now let's give it a shot again. So let's go back and where is the DB? And now let's try to run this again. I got some other class not found. Why is that? Oh, sorry. I have no DB utility, so I have to copy the reference like this. And this is what is the thing. And now let's try to run this. This is the same problem I had, but I thought it's something to do with the class not found. Okay, here I'm getting something else. Fail to JDBC connection. Client does not support authentication protocol. Consider upgrading MySQL client. Okay, so this is running on my Docker. So I don't know if I can directly connect to the Docker just like this. So I think that's another challenge. So my operating system is doesn't support to set up the MySQL locally. It's everything sitting on the cloud. I'm not sure if on the Docker. I don't know. Is there any way I can support like that? Open in a browser. 330. I don't think so. I can do that. Okay, I think that could be the reason why I'm not able to. So ideally, so Kaja, are you there, Kaja? Hello, Kaja, you there?
Yes, I.
Kaja, so I have a MySQL server running on my Docker. Is there any way we can connect to that Docker, like the instance which is running? Because I'm able to connect to via MySQL Workbench, but I'm not able to connect through localhost and 3308. I think this is not localhost, the one which is running in the Docker,
Yeah,
or
it
it should
cannot
be.
be the local host. It will be having its own IP. Uh, but yeah, I think we can check debug that later, Sai.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just trying to see. I'll just change this to 127 and see if it works. Otherwise, that's okay. We'll jump into the VS Code thing. Yeah, okay. Okay, for some reason we are not able to connect. A client does not support protocol considering. I think one could be something like, the reason could be like my OS is having a bit older OS. It's not Mojave or it's not, it's High Sierra. Probably could be that. But the idea is pretty simple. This is what we need to configure the JDBC, the username and password. And this is what we may need to make a call. And this is how you get the data. So pretty straightforward. You can fetch the response from the DB And you can also play around with the DB results. You can pass the data from the DB to your API test as well. So for now, let's stop this DB utils, and I will quickly jump on to the last one. Oh, we still have the master techniques with Karate GraphQL testing. I'll quickly cover that. So let's create another feature file like GraphQL. So let's Control C, Control V, and I say GraphQL test GraphQL. Okay. So in this test GraphQL, let's open this and delete everything. And we don't want anything here. We just say GraphQL feature file. Okay. And we remove this, and you will say GraphQL and run a scenario to test the GraphQL, and we say given. So this is the URL, I can share it with you guys. You can take a look at it. It's pretty interesting. Opens, widely available. Anyone can play around with this GraphQL thing. So when it comes to GraphQL, it is not a traditional JSON payload we send. We send it as a string. So you need to copy this and go back. And here we say URL is the URL, the one which we're going to look at it. But here, I'm going to store the data in this payload. So this is, I've already stored the data here. If you see, I have the same data. I pasted it here. And this is my payload for the GraphQL. I go back here and I say, this is what is the URL. So the URL is so this is the URL. So this is what I need to copy, GraphQL, and I paste it here. Okay, so I think this is the one. Control C, Control V. I think it is. I think it is API SpaceX. Okay, let me copy this. Control C, and yeah. Now here I would say, now I need to make a post call. So GraphQL is all about making a post call, not a get call. It looks like a get, but it is not actually when it comes to this REST world. So here we're saying given, and we need to get the response. So we need to get the payload. So how do we get the payload? Here is we need to say get def payload is equal to, we just say karate dot read as a string and that file name. So here I have a file name called payload.txt. So pay attention to this one. So when you say read as a string, we are telling the Karate that don't transform this payload.txt file as a typical JSON structure. Just give me the way you read it. That is what we're indicating, saying that read as a string, and we store that in a variable called def. And now we wanted to give that payload to this payload, that is your request payload. And when I make a call like post, then I should see the status as 200. Now let's try to run this and see what will happen. So we got a failed test. It's a 500. SpaceX land GraphQL. That's what it is. The payload. Read as a string. What else we have? Okay, it's interesting. Okay, let me copy it again. I think I made a mistake here. Okay, so let me go back to this. Control C. Control V. Okay. Now I go to um, the the feature file again, the test GraphQL. Given URL is this, and this is what is the payload. And yes, that's about it. So let me check over here. Yeah, we do the same thing over here. Oh, I need to give this way. Okay, this is a problem. I need to give like query is equal to query. That was the main thing. I all is something we need to be careful. So when we make a GraphQL call, we need to give anything. If you want to pass a payload, we should make sure that the query is a keyword to be given in your method, and that is what we say query. And this is a payload, which is what we read from the file, and this is an embedded expression over here. And now let's try to run this and see what will happen. Okay, so looks like it's successful. It is successful. Now, if you go back and check your response, and let's close this, close this, close this. Yeah, this is what is a GraphQL test. And this is what the post call we made here. And this is what the response we got. And this is a success code. And this is what the response we got. Now, what is the matched techniques I was talking about here is I think we don't have much time to go there. So I'll just quickly go through what is it we can do. So we can also go to the data. We can check some of the arrays like this. Let's say there is a core array and it should be length is equal to greater than 1. We have seen this earlier, but I don't have time to talk in detail, but I would encourage you guys to go through the karate documentation here. There is something called a matches. There is a lot of techniques is given over here. I would advise you to take a look at it, since we are kind of we need to talk about even the Visual Studio code as well. So for that reason, I'm kind of speeding up here. Okay, so but the concept is pretty straightforward. When you have the GraphQL test, you just have to make sure that read as a string and pass the payload, and like with this query is a keyword, and it should be done. So the next thing is Visual Studio Code. So I already have Visual Studio Code configured on my machine. So you need to download the Visual Studio Code, and once you download the Visual Studio Code, you have to go to these extensions and install something called Karate Runner. Okay, so you go to this extension and install the Karate Runner. You get to see this, this extension showing up out there. Install it, and you should be done. Now you see an extension like Karate over here. Now, few important things to play, to pay attention over here. Here is I installed Visual Studio Code, any version you can use it, but I would encourage you guys to take the latest version of the Visual Studio Code. It doesn't matter what other version you have it. And I've configured a simple Java project. So that one is like, you can go to the Maven project and you can just copy these command, and you can, and I'll share it over in the chat. So you can create one uh, simple Java project for now. Just create this Java project, run this, and give the artifact ID and the group ID whatever you wanted. So it is basically what do you call it? It's interactive mode, so you can play around with that. And once you create that, a project, so you should see. If I go back here, I think I would have already created it, but yeah, let's go back now to this. So the Visual Studio Code. Let's open the and reveal in Finder. Yeah, so this is how it looks like, my simple Maven Java project. So I did not do anything with respect to the main class. Everything I've done it in the test. So if I expand this test, I don't have anything in the same app.test. Only the resources, I have something called Parabank UI feature file. So I'll probably rename this as a simple UI feature file. There's nothing much there. So it says github.feature file. I would say that. Now GitHub user GitHub, I'll just rename that as GitHub UI. Yeah. And if you see this syntax, right, this feature, background and all, you should probably have another extension called, Gherkin. Make sure that you install that Gherkin syntax. So Cucumber Gherkin full support, you can install that. And I've also installed something called syntax for highlighting. It's not mandatory, but you can feel free to install it. But this make sure that you install this Cucumber Gherkin full support. That's something will be useful if you want to read this keywords, the blue and this orangish colors. Now, once we install everything, once you also created a Maven project, you go to the resources and you can create a feature file like this one. And here you can just say run a feature file, and you have something called background. This is where we basically instantiate a Chrome driver. So this when we talk about the UI automation, there's a lot. We I would encourage you guys to take a look at these as the documentation. It's the same thing what we see it in the GitHub only. So this is into.github.io. So here it's given straightforward, saying that what is the driver, what is the locator we give, and what we wanted to click, and what is that you wanted to verify the URL and things like that. So there's a whole lot of stuff, documentation over here, clicking, input, highlight. We will not be able to go through each and everything, but it's pretty straightforward. It's more informative. But the important thing is, once you set this up correctly, the rest you can play around with the Karate UI or documentation. It's not that so complex. But once you set up the Visual Studio Code, you need to make sure that this jar file is downloaded and sits at the root level. If you don't have this jar file, it won't work. So what is this jar file? So if you go back to your browser, there is something called a zip release. Let me take you there. There's something called zip release. And this zip release, if you see, if you want to make it to work, you need to have the karate.jar file configured locally. So I have downloaded the karate jar file, like the release file. If you go to the somewhere here, I happen to see there is a release. Yeah, you can download, you can go to the bin tray and download the version. Let's say if you go here, I have a 0.9.6. I download it, and now after I download it, I cannot keep the name of the file like 0.9.6. I have to rename this to karate.jar, and when I start this feature file, it goes and start this karate.jar file. It looks for this karate.jar file, and then it configure it and start the browser. Now, what we are trying to do over here is we're just uh, trying to launch the browser and play around with the options, the username and password. So let's look at the very simple example given here. Yeah, this will be the last of our last session. So the last topic, and after that we'll open for questions. I know it's pretty late, but I don't want to drag it again, to the next week. So I thought I'll cover this today in this session. So karate.ui. Oh, I think I closed that link. Okay, so karate in GitHub, I closed it. UI testing. Yeah. So yeah, so let's try to, okay, now here we're opening the google.com, and let's open the google.com here. This is where you need to give the Chrome version. And here we say driver HTTPS, and here we say google.com like that. And here we're saying input this Q. We all know how the locator works, so I will not get there. And here we say input is a keyword, and just give that input this name is equal to Q, and I close that, and I would here say test, or we say karate something. And here we say when click the input button, so input like this. And here we say name is equal to btn, and btn like that. And I think it's button I, yeah. So we can also wait for the URL to change. So that's a syntax, that's a nice keyword, you have it out there. So you can just say https github.com intuit karate. Okay, so this is about it, and this should be karate space DSL. Okay, so now let's try to run this and see what will happen. Let me debug this. So for now, let's debug it. So if you see here, this is what is starting this karate. It started this karate here, and I put a breakpoint over here, and I got return empty. Okay, so now here, if I put another breakpoint here, for some reason the breakpoints are not showing up. Okay, so step over. Now if I see, I should have my Chrome browser started. Okay. Okay, let me stop it again. I think something I messed up with the Visual Studio Code last minute. Let me just restart this Visual Studio Code for a minute. Okay, I should be able to get this to working. Go here. Oh yeah, now I have it, the debug point. So here is a debug, and here I click on debug. Now it started the karate debug, and it's starting this karate jar file, and now I should see the Chrome driver starting up. So I have to just play this. The browser is started, you see this one, and the browser is gone to the google.com here. And now here I'm saying, um, enter the Karate DSL. Now I click on this, you see the Karate DSL is entered over here. But let me bring this a little down like this. What I wanted to do here is, I don't want to enter the Karate DSL. What if I wanted to enter something else? So let me do this so that we can see it both together. Yes, so here I want to change this to something like I'll probably say rest assured. Okay, and now you see there is something called hot reload. This is called restart. There's nothing called reload, but when you say restart, it goes back, and you can change the, you can go back and set this to rest assured. So let's do that now. Let's try to reload that. So we just do reload. So reload is successful here. Now we go back up. So we go back. So we are doing a step back and step back. And here, now when we press this one, it is loaded to google.com, and this time it has to enter rest assured. So now when I click this, it entered rest assured. You see this one? And now when I click on this button, it clicked that rest assured. Now we're expecting that we're getting a different URL. It's actually failing because we don't get to see this, because we don't have this. Now here, I'll copy this, and here I'll change this to something else. Like I'll remove this and I'll paste it here. Now I'll reload this again. And now I go back one step up, and I'll try to, I think I need to go back again because I cannot just jump to the direct one step, the last step. I need to go back again. Okay, now go back. Now here again, I run this, run this, run this, and this is what it is. So the test is finished. The test is finished now. The browser is also closed. Now if you go back here, you see the test is completed. There's a one failed test for why it is failed. Okay, why it is failed? Okay, we had some. Okay, so basically I'm looking for something which I did not get it. Oh yeah, so I was looking for this one, but I found something else. Yeah, so now if you run this, so basically the wait if you're looking for something called wait for URL, I think this is did not respect that URL. It was still looking at the Karate URL. I don't know why we're getting this, but basically it should basically look for this particular value, because when the debugging, we are saying that we wanted to look for this one, not for the Karate URL. So that's as simple as that, how we want to debug it. So that's the main importance of this Visual Studio Code. So you're not limited to use, sorry, you're not like, it's not mandatory that you have to use Visual Studio Code for UI testing. You're allowed to use even IntelliJ IDE, but just for the sake of debugging capabilities, you can use, that's what I've seen, debugging capabilities are pretty good. When we use Visual Studio Code, you can debug line by line, and then you can do a hot reload, go back and do many more things like that. You can also get this Karate run and Karate debug. This is a kind of, the links, you get it at the top of your feature file. So that's about the UI testing in Visual Studio Code. So I think we pretty much kind of covered everything. Yeah. So make sure that there's one mistake I made here is I've installed another Gherkin, plugin, and that actually uh, will stop me to, this is one of the plugin I've installed just now. I think this is the one I've installed, this particular Gherkin snippets and syntax highlight. And because of that, I was not able to see this particular karate run and debug. And after I uninstalled it, I'm able to see this one. And even this is called the gutter. And this gutter as well, I was not able to put the breakpoint for some reason. So make sure that you have the required plugin, not any other plugins. Like, you make sure pay attention to those plugins you install, or sorry, I mean the extensions, and make sure that you have the Karate jar file. So that's it pretty much from my end. And thank you all for joining this session. I hope you have learned something. Yeah, we will probably look at some other sessions later point of time. I don't want to drag it another week, so that's the reason I took a long time today to cover what are the topics I wanted to cover. Yeah, over to you, Kaja. Yeah. If you have any questions, uh, please feel free to ask right now. Hello.
You're audible, Sai.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, what I was saying, Kaja, I think we are pretty much done with the entire session. So I don't want to have another session just for the sake of UI testing. So we covered about the Visual Studio Code, the Karate Runner extension, DB testing, and GraphQL and things like that. So we are open for questions. If you don't have any question, we'll wrap it up. We will share the feature file, these project later. Yeah, yes, sure. The useful links in the Karate repo, will definitely share it via email, and you guys can play around with this and see. So there is another link which cannot be used for desktop. No, it can be used for desktop. It's pretty much possible. I've done that. So, but again, it works with you need to configure something called a WinApp driver. So let me share one scenario I happened to written some time back. So if you see, this is what I'm using, launching a 3D app on Windows. I cannot run this, of course. So here you need to use something called WinApp driver. And here I'm using MS Paint object. I'm launching the MS Paint. And here I say, this is a WinApp driver you need to configure. This is all this configuration. You get it on the Karate documentation. If you go back and look for this configured driver, you get to know a lot about configure Windows. Yeah, Windows desktop automation. You see, I think I think somebody just asked this question. So you can pretty much do it a lot here. You need to have this WinApp driver installed on your machine. And once you have it, you need to configure the session and the WinApp driver. Then you can call the your application, make sure that you should get this particular app name. So there are ways you can get this app name. If you are on Windows laptop, you can use something called PowerShell, and you can, there is a command. I don't have it right off the bat, but you can search for the command to get the app name of a specific application using the command, and you can start and you can do the test just like the way we have seen earlier. It doesn't mean that you have to have this specific app name like this. You can also give your own custom application. Just for the sake of simplicity, I've given this app name, but you can still achieve. If you achieve using Java WinApp and you should be able to achieve the same thing even with Karate as well. There's no change there. Just the syntax here is a bit different. That's all, you have to pay attention. So it supports parallel execution very well, and it supports even the mobile testing. So I've not tried it, but it's up to you if you want to try it. But the basic testing, let's say if you have a situation like you wanted to log into a specific application, get some data, then make some tons of API calls, then Karate will be best fit. If you have a full-fledged API, full-fledged UI testing, and in that case, you take a decision, you do your POC, then you see how you wanted to, use Karate. If you have a remote chat testing, let's say you have to open two browsers at one time and you need to do testing, in that case, it may not support well. Karate Robo can be used for desktop automation. Yes, you can also use as traditional the UI automation as well. But yeah, we encourage you guys to try both the options and see how it works. Any other questions you have? Let me know.
Hi, Sai, hi, Khaja. I had a query
Yeah.
related to books. Yeah. So I had a scenario over here. After each scenario execution, I want its test case status, and then I have to go to third party, like for example, Jira, or you may say Azure DevOps or some test management tool. I have to go there and update the test case status of the test executed over here, and bulk I have to update the status over there. So how can I do it through the
Yeah,
configure after scenario or something, or anything else
you can.
can be done in this scenario?
Yeah, you can. You have options, or you have multiple options there. So one thing is you can use the Karate runner over here. I'm just giving and showing an example over here. So let's say you have a feature file like this. So you need to do couple of things here. You need to call your API test cases into Java like this. You need to have a JUnit test runner, and you need to call your feature files into your via Karate runner, and run all the feature files. And I also heard that you said you have a situation where you need to know whether that test is successful or not, right? You need
Yeah.
to get all the status of the test cases. So
Yes.
the way you can get the status of the test case is only using this results file. So there is an object called result. That result will contain the data or the status of all the feature files whatever you ran. So here I've gave like one specific feature file here, but it's not necessary that you should give the specific feature file. I can also give anything. I can just say runner dot parallel runner dot I can add uh, you know I can also say runner dot add parallel, and here I can give the list of all the feature files. Here you can have a list of feature files, and you can run this way, and you can get the results into this. So let's say I have like this. So you have like a feature files like this. I have like all the feature files sits into this specific path. I read all that and dump into this collection, and send that the entire collection to this runner class, that is the Karate runner, and let that Karate run it in a parallel mode, like 2 threads or 3 threads or whatever the threads you're interested in. And once you run all of them, you get into the results. The results will be like a list of results, and you iterate that results and see if you have any error messages, see if any failed count. If you don't have any failed count, you're good. But if you want to get it to the individual status, you need to iterate the result object, and fetch that each the feature file status over there. And based on that, you need to write code here. You need to write custom code again to connect to the Jira. You need to write connect to the Jira. So you need to do that. So if you have a API, let's say you have a Jira API, then the job is even more simpler. You can everything achieve it in even in karate, in using karate itself. So the way you can do over here is you can probably, like, if you go back, I'll just give you a structure and a skeleton. So what you can do here is you can just first make a call to, you run your feature files. Okay, this is the first thing is run your feature file. Okay, then you get the response. That is the response of the feature file of the scenario. Okay, then after that, what you need to do here is, if you have a Jira API, you make sure that you connect via karate again. Okay, karate. And now this response, you store it in a variable called resp, right? Now here, when you make a connection to the Jira API, if it is successful, then you check whether that response is status code is 200 or whatever, and you can try. But the thing here is, there is another caveat. What is that? The problem here is, if you're doing it from karate, if this test is failed for some reason, the rest of the code will not run. Let's say you are, after this, you're connecting to, let's say you're connecting to Jira API, right? You ran this test, you got 401 instead of 200, the rest of the code won't run. So that's another thing you need to pay attention. But I would probably recommend, instead of doing via karate to connect to the Jira API, you run your API test cases from via karate, like the way I shown you just now, and collect all the results and run through the results. And based on that, you connect to the Jira API or the Jira SDK using your custom Java code, so that you'll have more control. If one of the feature file is failed, you have a control and you can proceed that way.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks,
Sure.
Sai.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
All right. Okay. Cool. If you don't have any questions, so let's wrap it up. So today is like 2 hours we spend, and it's pretty. Okay.
Yes, I look like there are no further questions. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll be coming up with another series. Currently, we are running another series called as Infrastructure as Code with Ansible, Packer, and Terraform. And we are going to start pretty soon with another series on Cypress. So please look out for the meetup group, where we would be posting all the ongoing and future sessions over there. So please feel free to share with your friends also. We would be interested to know if there are any other tools or frameworks or anything else in and around testing and automation and DevOps world that you would like to have us covered. Once again, thanks everyone for joining the session. Sai,
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
closing?
One thing is, see, we have covered, keeping in mind that everyone new to this karate, and some sessions sort of probably dragged further. Maybe some sessions would have been like very low level. So I kept one thing in my mind, that everybody is new to this world, to this karate framework, and that with that sense we have given the training. We conducted these sessions. So if you have any specific needs that it's not up to the mark, I would probably wanted to have like this. If you have any feedback, I would love to have the feedback. If you think that we are too fast, or maybe you're not covering something very important, yeah, please let us know your feedback as well, so that we'll try to improve on that, and we'll probably take that as the feedback and improve that in the next upcoming sessions.
Yeah, can I talk?
Yeah, please go ahead. Who is this? Can you introduce
Shiva.
yourself?
Yeah,
Hey,
my
Shiva.
name is Shiva, and I'd like to have only a request actually for the both Kaja and to the Sai. Like, thanks that you've given us an opportunity to know a new framework karate, and you taught us, and thanks for Kaja to organize it. And only the concern here, I thought of making a request. If you can allow us a couple of weeks to do our preparation with whatever you taught over the last 5 weeks, okay? And if we can catch up again, probably after